Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second virtual Friday morning business breakfast talk in our ongoing virtual event series, Nexicom Presents Fourth Line Theater at Home. These sessions will be an opportunity to get to know local political and business leaders and the inner workings of their sectors. So excited to spend some time today with Jeannine Taylor, but before I do, I just have a few notes. First off, I want to acknowledge our amazing longtime sponsors of Fourth Line Theater, Nexicom, for their continued support and innovative approach to sponsorship during these unprecedented times. I would also like to acknowledge Exit Realty LifeLock, our major sponsor. Thanks to both of you. Some housekeeping notes. I just want to let you know that if your audio is muted. If you would like to submit a question to Jeannine or myself, we'll be happy to answer them towards the end of the session. Just put your question in the Q&A, and then Lindy will look at those, and she will facilitate us being asked them a little bit later on. Also be aware if you mistakenly exit the webinar or have any technical difficulties, you can simply re-enter by clicking on the Zoom link we sent you earlier today, and you'll get back in the same way you arrived. Be sure to follow our social media, e-blasts, and visit our website to register for our upcoming virtual events. On July 10th, I'll be chatting with the Mayor of Peterborough, Diane Tarian, and on July 17th, I'll be sitting down with one of Canada's most respected financial investment professionals, Andrew Pyle, portfolio and branch manager of the Pyle Group Scotia Wealth Management. And both of these events will be over Zoom, and they start at 8 a.m. on the 2 Fridays. Also at the farm, we have Nexicom Presents Fourth Line Theater at the farm, starting on July 3rd, which is a week today, from 8 till 12. We will be doing our farmers markets. And we also have our phone-in monologue series. You can find all of that on our website. And you can also visit Fourth Line Theater's YouTube channel to view all of our virtual events after this live presentation. And now, would you all join me in welcoming Jeannine Taylor?
I am. Hey, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am all right. So tell me where you are right now.
I'm at my home office in Peterborough.
So this is so interesting to me. You've had a home office a lot longer than the rest of us.
Yes, for the past couple of months, we've been calling you all amateurs because, well, anyone who hasn't worked at home. I've been doing this since 1992. So yeah. And then when I met Bruce, he had a huge adaptation to working at home. You know, it's just leave your office and close your door and walk away. It's not that easy sometimes when you're working at home.
Yeah. So do you think then, I'm so curious, so that's 28 years of working at home. Do you think you knew before everyone else, before the internet went crazy, about 24/7 work, like that you couldn't shut it off? Or how do you balance that?
Oh, that's a really good question. How do you balance it? I mean, our business currently is 24/7, so that's really difficult. You have to take those moments when you can to get some downtime. So the routine is really different. It's like, okay. And then you have the perpetual, revenue development. So you feel, if you're self-employed, you feel that you can't turn that off, right? So you have to really work at, okay, this is some downtime. I need to take advantage of this. So it becomes about working smart for your own sanity and yeah.
So now, full disclosure to everyone who's watching us, you and I met in, I think, 1988 or 89, and
Yes.
you hired me at Lansdowne Place
Yeah.
to manage the Santa Land.
I mean, I tend to forget that we did that, but when I think about you and your role now, it seems difficult to recall that. And I think your father was even one of our Santas, right?
My dad, Norm, was one of the Santas at Santaland. So I had just come back from Edmonton. I had lived there and was going to U of A, had come back to Peterborough, and you hired me at Santaland. And then you hired me for several more years to do catering and balloon decorating for Cadillac Fairview at the mall.
Yeah, so I was, that was kind of my first true marketing role. I was the marketing director for Cadillac Fairview when they managed Lansdowne Place. So it was a great community role because we did marketing. I didn't manage the marketing and advertising, but I also did all of the community work. We actually won an award for our community work, which was amazing. So that was kind of a forerunner to what we're doing now too.
I know, it's so funny. It's so, I tell people sometimes, I catered and balloon decorated to put myself through university, but I think I have to credit you with hiring me to do all that.
Oh, that's great. I didn't realize that was that important to you at the time. So that's great. Good.
It was huge.
Good.
So look at you're born and raised in Peterborough, is that right?
South End. Yep. There's a park. Yep. South End, went to Kenner, went to Confed. There's a park in the South End named after my dad, John Taylor Memorial Park, because he was a rabble rouser in the South End, saved a park and a pool that, well, he wouldn't take credit for doing it on his own. He would credit the community. But in fact, the community organization there was the forerunner for the city of Peterborough's community associations. It was pretty early on. It was like in the mid 80s as well. So yeah.
Wow.
And my mom's still there. My mom is still in the city.
In the house? Is she still
She
in?
is. Yeah, she's 95.
So I'm a North End girl, Edmondson Heights and Adam Scott.
Right.
And
Wow.
yeah, so, and I think we've had kind of parallel lives, but you always seemed, older, more mature and more exotic. Not older in a bad way, but more mature.
I don't think I've ever been called exotic before. That's a good one. Okay.
You did.
I'll take it.
Yeah. So I'm interested in, you went to Fleming, right? You did an arts admin thing first?
I did. So when I was in the South End going to Kenner, David Burke was my high school art teacher. So I credit him for gently pushing me to take the arts admin studies. At that time, he was one of the instructors as well, as was Eric Loader. And I mean, it was just a star-studded program, right? So we didn't realize how star-studded it was at the time, but it was. So I did that in 81. And then when I worked for Cadillac Fairview, I went back and did some marketing, a marketing diploma later in the 80s.
And when you think back to that time, that late 80s period, did you have any sense of the coming of electronic media? Like, I'm curious about when that kernel of that idea, because obviously, Jeannine, you were ahead of the curve with electronic media, but where's the kernel of that?
Well, I don't think that happened until 95. Like, we were all hearing about the information superhighway. I always have this sense of, I'm going to apologize to the audience for anyone who was, when I talk about my story or our story, I have the sense now that there are people who are not yet born yet in the years that we're talking about. But in the early 90s, there was a lot of talk about the information superhighway, which just kind of is a gag worthy term now, but it was coming and we didn't understand it. And at the time, around 90, I think it was 95, the fall, I was working for 3 print magazines, and one of them was a business publication, and the internet was coming, and we didn't really know what that meant. September 1995, we had to do a cover story for Microwave, who at that time, they were one of the suppliers. And we should also mention that, Nexicom was it was Kawartha.net then, so that history was starting to build. But at the time we had to do a cover for Microwave, and we couldn't figure out how to do that. We're like, what is the information superhighway? So we took the 2 owners out to the Lily Lake Road and put them in the middle of the highway, and just information superhighway was kind of goofy. But so we really didn't understand. I certainly didn't understand until December of that year when I got access finally, and you had to go and pick up your floppy disks from your supplier. And it was a bit of a technical hurdle. I didn't really have tech support at that time. So I was a writer working in print and traditional media, and then I land on the internet, and I make this joke about that I was single that year, and I just spent 3 days surfing the internet. Like, I literally did just do nothing else for the whole vacation. And I went back and said to my print publisher, we need to do the internet. And, at that time, everyone was afraid of it, right? It's like, we did not understand what it was, but I just knew right away it was going to change everything.
So, okay, so you are a prescient person. I suspected that. What was on the internet that weekend in December of 1995 that you did for the whole weekend?
For me, there were some personal things. I mean, just figuring out how it worked. And, we were using web crawler at the time and searching, and it was pretty overwhelming. But I was spending a lot of time doing kayaking sites, which would today look really rudimentary to what we know now. But I felt that I had done, because I was a kayaker at that time, I just started that year, I felt that I had done a virtual global tour of kayaking when I was finished. So, and those things are all still there. I know, it's amazing, right? Yeah, it was great.
So now, when you were working for those 3 print publications, were you already working at home, or were you going into an office at that point?
No, We were working at home. And basically I have to credit that publisher for doing that because all of the salespeople worked independently. He worked at home. So really he has credit for doing that as well. So
And pluses and minuses of working at home, because I guess I'm a bit worried, like for my husband, he's working at home right now, but he's a quiet guy. And he used to go before COVID, he would go into an office and work, even though he works in IT. And I
right.
worry about him in terms of the human contact. So I'm just curious about what you love about it and what maybe you don't love about working at home.
And I'm not sure that I can compare it now because, given that we've been doing it since 1992, I love the freedom. But that also comes with self-employment to a certain degree. So it's a little bit different than the COVID situation where people are tied to offices. I know that a lot of people with the work styles where they need that social component have struggled. Sometimes when we hire people who need that, it's been an issue for them often to deal with that, and they end up substituting social media or something like that. So that can be a risk. So I think knowing your personal work style and what your needs are is important, and balancing that.
So you're working for someone else and it's the early 90s. Do you know already that you have an entrepreneurial interest or bent? Because I guess the reason I'm asking that is I am not entrepreneurial at all. I love the structure of an organization. Even if it's an organization that I run, I'm not one of those people that's going to go out and drum up business. This is not my thing. So I'm just curious, talk to me about you and entrepreneurship.
I don't think I saw it coming. I think if I had seen it coming, I probably would have planned it differently. It just happened. And I think it was more born from that I'm a marketer and a promoter. So if something's going to happen, then we're going to make it happen. We're going to make shit happen. So, it's just that whole, okay, this needs to happen. We need a local publication. I'm going to make it happen. And in fact, I quit my job and launched Quid in May of that following year. So, I mean, there was no planning in that. There was no entrepreneurial plan the way there would be today with the resources that we have in the community to do those kind of things, right?
Right, you'd go to some of those places and you would sit down and they'd help you create a business plan. But did you create a business plan? Did you do anything like that?
We did, but because we had to do revenue development, I had to figure that out. So yeah, I mean, yes, but probably not well. The other issue that I had early on was that I was a woman and a single woman. And even though I owned my home, it was impossible to get financing. The banks were afraid of what is the internet. It was pretty early. And they were afraid we couldn't get business insurance for internet. It was just really, really crazy.
And what was the idea? Tell me when you quit the job at the three print magazines, what was the idea you started with?
The idea was that we were going to create an online magazine, that it was going to be community based and focus on the arts because arts administration was my background and love of the arts. And we did events. I mean, from the beginning, it was, we realized, when I say we, I should be saying I, at that time, it was like me. We realized that we could do that. It could be a community publication. So, yeah.
From the time you got the idea and left your job so that would be spring of 96, what was the first iteration of Quid Novus?
So it was quidnovus.com launched on May 1st, 1996. And right out of the gate, 10,000 hits, which was a lot of traffic in the first week. So, and we got some good publicity too. CBC called me. This is kind of crazy as well. They asked me to drive to Toronto to be interviewed on radio. And it was a big deal. It was like, oh, you can read it. It doesn't exist in print. So it was kind of interesting. And Chucks and the Examiner covered us too, which would never happen now. I don't think that they'd be covering other media now. So.
Right. Okay. So I want to ask about that. Let's put a pin in that one. But I want to know where the first name, where Quid Novus came from.
Oh, so a person I was working with, people might know Michael Young. He was in the community at that time. He was my first partner, really. He had been taking a web development course, and I think locally at a local company, Excel. Does that make sense? Anyway, um, but that was also early on web development. What is that, right? In spring of 1996, and he helped me get the first site up, and it was his idea because quid novus is actually incorrect Latin. Quid novi means what news or what's new in Latin. That's incorrect. People who are watching who speak Latin, please forgive me. But I mean, basically,
Those Latin speakers who are watching will forgive.
okay, good.
Don't send
So
any email complaints about this.
yeah, so we kind of incorrectly added the S on, but that was kind of a good thing because then, it was a unique name, and I think a unique name is important. One of the downsides of the whole process was that we were so early on in web development that yes, we launched the publication and the intent was to sell advertising, but we got really busy doing website development because there was demand for it. So people were looking to who's doing this, what's going on. And that kind of sidetracked me for about 16 years. Yeah.
What? So
Yeah, it did. No, it did.
less of the magazine for 16 years and more of you guys building other people's websites?
We maintained quidnovus.com as an online publication for forever, like until it's never gone away. And we did website development during that time frame. So 16 years of website development. Around 2006 or 7, social media started to shake things up. Self-propelled website development started, people started getting into doing it themselves. So I just kind of saw some writing on the wall there and shifted out of doing that and more to the publication. Like I just felt that the time was right to look back at, okay, what are we doing here? And are we actually it had been shelved for too long since, the late 90s. And yeah, we won a ton of awards on our website development, which was great. And
Awesome.
did great work. And I met Bruce during that process, and he's a techie. So it was all part of the plan.
Right. So I wanted to ask you about this. Are you technical? Like, are you software, hardware, coding? Like, tell me about you and your relationship to technology.
Well, I did. I had to learn, right? I had done the production of the print publications. So I had done the composing of that. So it wasn't that much of a stretch for me to move into what was very rudimentary HTML at that time. So yeah, I did a lot of our website updates in the early days, HTML, but those were really early days. I mean, I remember when Netscape launched their new browser and we had to all download it overnight because it was like Netscape 1.2. I will never forget it. We waited for it for a long time. Internet Explorer was a problem, Internet Explorer 3 at that time. So yeah, there were a lot of technical hurdles. It's a lot smoother now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So, I mean, we all expect things to run really quickly now, and we're ticked off if our Netflix at all have to think about it. But I have so many questions. Like, how do you get all the bandwidth? And is it the same kind of problems, or are the technical problems different now?
I think they're ramped up in a different way. But yeah, I mean, in terms of bandwidth and those kind of things, we have Korsunov running on a dedicated server because our traffic is high enough that it warrants that. So our site can't be sitting on a shared server. A lot of if you're going out to buy web hosting, you're basically on a shared server. You're buying your slot underneath someone else who's probably reselling for Bluehost or whatever. It's one of my pet peeves, actually, that people just go and buy American hosting and don't look at Canadian suppliers. We're on a Canadian server, and we've done that since I think the early 2000s because we had problems with American suppliers. So I'm going off on a tangent, but
No, I'm interested in this.
It can be an issue. It can be an issue because we had a technical issue yesterday related to our firewall, and we rarely have issues. Like I can't even remember the last time we had an issue, but our hosting company is in Montreal, so we were able to make really fast contact with them. I can't say that would happen with so buy local, people. If you're thinking about hosting, it's a definitely, yeah.
Lindy?
like Nexicom.
I was going to say, well, they definitely host us.
Yeah.
Let's make sure all of our stuff is local. That's great. I want to go back to you as a writer, and your history and genesis as a writer. Were you writing as a kid? Are you a journaler?
No, no, and I don't consider myself a writer. I don't, even though my title is editor in chief. I think that my communication skills, I would call myself a communicator. So publicist, communicator, marketer, marketing copy, I think I lean to that. I know good writing when I see it because of that, because I'm a marketer. And that ramps up all the demands. If any of our writers are here, they'll know that the demand is, the quality standard that we set is high. And we have an amazing editor, so that helps. But I don't consider myself a writer. It takes time to write well, and I just tend to not have that time when I can focus on it and take a few minutes to write. I'm currently doing an weekly intro to our e-news, and I have to work on that like 300-word piece for about 4 days just to let it, mull over a bit and get the message right. So I completely appreciate what our writers go through, and a writer who can write well quickly is rare.
Wow. So you think of yourself as an editor, and you have experience. I mean, you went to school for all this. Like you do edit and some CP style. Does all that still happen now?
We use CP style because we work to that standard, but I can't say that I have technical training in that. I mean, it's been on the job training for a number of years. So
When you were like in school and then first out at at the Lansdowne Place with Cadillac Fairview, did you have a vision for what your life would be like right now, 30 years later? And is this it?
I don't think I had a vision, which is unfortunate. I mean, if I went back in time, I'd probably say, build a better plan. I think I was kind of meandering with things that I liked to do, whether it was promotion or marketing, or I worked for arts organizations after I got out of college. So that was great. Those were all great learning experiences. And, I worked at some pretty cool, like I worked at Art Space in the Market Hall when David Burke was redesigning it in '85. I worked for Canadian Images Film Festival. So those were all great, fun jobs, right? It was like early gig economy. But I don't think I had a solid plan. So I didn't see this coming.
It's amazing. It's amazing what you've achieved. So is Bruce Head the other major key to your success?
He is. So we met in 1996, and we met about 4 weeks after Quid Novus launched, which was kind of interesting. We met on Match.com. So also very early, like, can you picture that? May 1996.
I cannot. Like, my head has actually just exploded.
My poor parents, like, oh my gosh, 96 online dating. What is that? What is the internet? I just embraced it, didn't I? Yeah, I did. So we met. It was kind of interesting because we met on the last day before his profile expired, which was also his birthday. So that was kind of interesting. And we didn't meet face to face for quite some time. We had an email relationship for a while. We didn't even talk on the phone. So, I mean, that's kind of a clue that maybe we're both writers there. A little bit of
and you have the relationship through and with the internet as well, you guys.
Yeah, it goes way back. And Bruce is also a techie. I mean, he is our techie. He is our programmer. He designed our website. And well, I mean, we designed it together. He's not a graphics person as much. He can do that, but he's definitely our techie and our programmer. So, and he did a lot of our website development as well.
Is he hardware and software?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if anyone remembers the Saturday Night Live computer guy. Like, in terms of, he's one of those. He's like, just get out of the chair and let me deal with it, but yeah. So
And
he's tech support, but it's not always fun.
Right. Fair enough. And so obviously that the two of you and that mix accounts for a lot of the success that we see with orthonow.com, right?
Oh,
Would I be right?
No, absolutely. I give our team full credit. And sometimes, honestly, I don't feel that it's fair that I'm front and center on that. So I try to give them as much credit as possible. And many of our writers, and I think more of our readers now realize that, someone said to me this week, I don't know who it was, like, wow, Bruce is a really good writer, because he doesn't often publish under his own byline or have the time to do that. He's just cranking out some of the news pieces. But yeah, he is a very good writer, and he would much rather be writing a novel
Right.
than doing this. So yeah.
Well,
And
there,
he worked at M&R for quite some time. He was working in communications government when we met. So he was Queen's Park Communications, has that understanding of the political process and policy. He's our research guru, so he's got all of those skills, but he's also techie. Yeah.
yeah. Oh gosh, somebody texted me. Sorry. I don't know how to turn the text thing off. I apologize. I
And
tell everyone who loves me not to text. Are you getting your cough? Are you getting your cough? Oh, you're blowing your
I'm
nose.
having the really bad allergy season stuff going on. So
This year, I
it's the
have
worst.
asthma and normally don't have spring allergies, but because I think the winter wasn't so
Mm,
as extreme or something, boy, it started early and it's wild.
it is.
All right, so now you two live in the house together and you both have offices in the house. Tell me
Yep.
about the balance of partner and partner, like life partner, business partner. How do you guys
It's really tough. Well, it can be really challenging. I mean, I think the statistic, and I've done research on this, and I think it's pretty solid, is that people who live and work together have a 93% failure rate. So yeah, it's pretty tough.
we're getting people back to their office buildings too. This does not bode well.
No, and you really have to plan around that. And I mean, I have to say, I think it's taken us over 20 years to figure that
And
out.
are you finding you're better at it now or
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm really fortunate that we work a lot. We work pretty much every day, and we have to be ready to work all the time. So I'm fortunate that I can actually kind of take off to the cottage, and I have a remote hub access, and we're close to a cell tower, so it's easy for me to work there. And as I'm saying that, I realize my level of privilege in that. But at the same time, we work every day and have to, like a few days this week we had 5:30 a.m. stories popping up. So it's all the time. So you have to realize that, okay, I can take a break for an hour now.
so
And
like I would never bitch or complain about anyone I work with. I love them all. But I can come home and decompress with my husband, with my kid. Um, when you work and live together, how do you decompress and who do you complain to about him?
that's actually something that is part of the skill set of this, is that, okay, this is not you, this is not blame at you, I need to vent about this, and then he will proceed to vent about me, or just, the situation. Like, you have to remove the personal from it, but yeah.
Well, obviously you guys have made it work, which is amazing.
So far, yeah. Okay, so the other thing is that it's kind of yin and yang, because I don't know if anyone's ever done disc profiling. We had that done early on by a coach. So I'm like entrepreneurial, high D. I can make decisions really quickly around entrepreneurial decisions. Bruce is the opposite. He's the opposite. He's methodical, research oriented. So very different. So that has its challenges in that our our skill sets are completely different. So both a benefit. I mean, I guess what we've done to accommodate that is that we divide the work that way, right? I do sales and marketing and steer the ship. That's all I do right now, is I just steer the ship.
So, when you kind of go back in 2006, I'm going to come to 2006 now. When you go back to the Quid Novus and the websites are waning because people can build their own, and where does Cortha now happen? Like, when does that all happen? How does it happen?
So we started phasing down on website development. We still do hosting, actually, because we were doing website development for so long that we built up our hosting business. And we still do a little bit of that. We still have clients that have been around that long that we still maintain that. And they're also housed on the Cortha Now dedicated server. So I think it was just a process of realizing that we needed to do less. The development time for korthenow.com as a brand was emerging. We had Rob Wilkes, who works for Fourth Line as well, did our logo. And I think that dates maybe back to 2007 or so. And we kind of had it ready to go, but it was also a conversion process. And there were new technologies emerging like WordPress and those kind of things that, and we had a legacy event system that was actually built in an older technology, SQL. So, and we still have it amazingly, but we have our own events database that we've maintained on our site. Yeah. For quite some time. So it was really an iterative process over a number, maybe about 3 or 4 years. And then we launched korthenow.com in, I think, 2010.
So it's about 10 years ago?
Yeah. I think we're coming up on, yeah.
And so there's no paywall, and I want to chat about that. So anyone can go on it. So where's your revenue derived from?
So we have a number of different revenue streams. We obviously have traditional internet, and we can call it traditional now, traditional internet banner advertising, right? So people can see those banner ads. We're really fortunate that because we're local and our advertisers are local, people tend to not use blockers on our site. And that's great because those banners do get a lot of impressions. We also develop a lot of products around what's called native advertising in the industry. We call it branded editorial. Those are some of our most successful pieces where we're doing a paid piece, we match a writer, and then we have a package of social promotion for that as well. So those are really successful pieces. And when you start putting those together with banner ads, then the impressions are pretty high on those, and the effectiveness as well, because we can promote them on our social channels. So our social channels are pretty key to what we do, and that's a whole other maintenance piece because you can't ignore, or you can't rely on those pieces to be, really, if anybody remembers MySpace, they disappeared pretty quickly. I think they lost millions of followers in 1 month in 2006 or so. So
I wonder what happened in 2006 that would make
it's really interesting if you ever have time to Google this about the theories of what happened with MySpace. But it is, yeah. The easy answer is that Facebook was.
That's what I was joking about.
Facebook was releasing to the public at that time. They were coming out of the academic world and releasing, but there were some issues in MySpace as well. There was some dissension in the company about which way they should be going, and so it was a pivotal moment for them that maybe they didn't take advantage of. So bye Tom.
So 2007, 8, 9, 10, korthenow.com is up and it's moving, but were you still seen as a kind of a pay, like not taken seriously as real journalism?
We still are not taken seriously sometimes.
Okay, well,
that's changing. That's changing though. But there's an element
in terms of the landscape here with Checks, which I guess is now Global Peterborough, and the Examiner, and even Peterborough This Week. I think of you guys as all the big players now, but 10 years ago, 12, 14 years ago, that would not be true, right?
That's correct. Was not true.
You kind of just imagined it and made it happen though, because now you are one of the big players, right?
I like to think that we are. I think that it depends on what our audience and our readers and our advertisers think. That's the important thing. I think that we're getting there, and it's one of the silver linings of COVID and in the pandemic, in that we delivered some pretty consistent, serious news from March on, and there were a lot of people sitting up, and our traffic tripled in March and April. Tripled.
So you were sitting around sort of on the 7th, 8th, 9th of March and just doing your regular thing. Did you have any sense like we might have to buckle in here? It's going to be wild for the next.
No, it happened overnight. My last meeting was Thursday, the 12th. I was meeting with Ian Burns from Cluster Fork. downtown to talk about their May show. And we were like, wow, do you think that the venues might have to close? This was Thursday the 12th. Do you think the venues might have to close? What's going to happen? No, it'll be okay. And that won't happen. The next day, no, actually, I went to an ACAC meeting that afternoon, which is the Culture Heritage Committee for the city, which is I'm proud to be a member of. And we all walked into the room, and the news was that Ford had closed the schools, right, leading into the March break. And it literally melted down overnight. It melted down. And that next week, we did 90 hours, like just nonstop. Like, what do we do? And I don't even remember like consciously pivoting. So I give Bruce credit for that, where we just had to move into that news format because we generally have about 1,200 events in our system at any time, 1,200, sometimes 1,400. That our events editor takes care of sourcing those. And I didn't do a count, but I think we lost most of them in the first couple of weeks. And we lost 75% revenue by the end of March, because we have, like Showplace, Market Hall. We sell a lot of tickets, and our banner ads were really effective for event promotion, and it was gone. So yeah, immediate pivot.
So you actually have to, right now you're working harder and producing more content than you've ever produced for 1/4 of the revenue?
Yeah. It's coming back though. I mean, it's coming back, and I'm not concerned about it. I mean, we have to pivot. We have to I hate that word, but we have to pivot, right? We had some plans to do some new product rollout. This was our year to disrupt. That was my word of the year. But so we're just reinventing how we're going to do that. We're behind where we wanted to be because we got a little bit sidetracked, but we still have those plans on track. So.
And is the COVID news easing up now? Is the workload easing up?
I think people are getting tired of it. So we're currently, we have to, and that's something that we need to look at soon. We realized that a few weeks ago, that people are getting tired of hearing about it. But at the same time, our COVID statistics daily update that we do, which covers the whole region of new cases and where it's at, it's still our top story, read for every day. It's our top story on Instagram. I've never had so many click-throughs on a story on Instagram as we do with that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I check you guys. I check the Toronto Star. We were in Mexico when this all broke and had to come back
Right.
10 days early for thousands of dollars extra to get back. But I checked the Star, maybe it was 20 times a day in the early days.
Yeah.
You guys and Worldometer,
Yeah.
And I'm finding with the Star, because I was Toronto based until a couple days ago, more Toronto based. They're easing up on the number of stories per day in COVID. It's not every hour now; it's every 3 hours or every 6 hours.
And I think there's a tolerance level of what people can take. We're seeing that with people just needing to have some kind of normal lives again. So there's a balance there of what do people really need to see. The other thing that we've become tied to that's never happened before in our industry is that the Prime Minister and the Premier are accessible to media conferences for us as a small independent news supplier. That's never happened before, where we can tune in because they're all publicized and they're on the internet and they're broadcast on television. So in the first few days, we were really tied to what was going on there. And that's easing off a bit.
Yeah, I find that too. Like, well, we were all home as well, but by the time we got home, I mean, every 11 a.m. we were watching what they were saying federally. Every 1 o'clock we were watching what they were saying provincially, and at 3:45 in Toronto, I was watching what they were saying municipally.
Right.
And I know those things are still happening less on the weekends. Like it must have been just wild for you to try to capture all the information.
I'd have to say for Bruce, it was. I mean, I was certainly trying to support what was going on. I mean, we didn't have anything for our arts and culture writers to do. We're just kind of regrouping on that now in terms of how do we recreate that coverage, and it's coming back, which is great. But yeah, it was full on news with minimal staff.
Yeah. It's crazy to think about all of it. And so with you and the other, and I'll just use this word, I'm sure you hate it, like the traditional media. So those papers, the television. How is your relationship with them? Because you mentioned earlier that they would never cover you now. Like when Quid Novus happened, they covered you. Like, what is that relationship like? And where is the good and the bad tension in that relationship?
So when we're at media events, we have pretty good relationships with most of the media. I mean, I love having a visit with Clifford Clifford will tell me how to take the photos, and that's good. But he's very generous because he will often set up a photo for everyone and then step back. He'll set up the photo and step back. So those relationships exist, and they're great. Sometimes I think that we threaten some of them, and there is definitely tension there on that. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because there are going to be some players going down, I think. So, not that we wish anyone to lose
Oh, no, of course.
their jobs and livelihood, but I think there's going to be a big shift coming out of this for sure.
When it became so clear, as I'm thinking for some of those traditional medias, that they had to have an internet presence. I mean, I would think this is
Yeah.
in the last decade. Did they have to look to you? Were they scrambling? Were you ideally suited uh, a way to capture people and build brand loyalty? I'm just curious your thoughts on all that.
Well, it is interesting because I don't think that they look to us or small publishers as much, but just in the past 4 to 5 years, a lot of smaller publishers are emerging on the internet. Some of them tend to be tied to a print version, but because of the meltdown in the industry, there are a lot of journalists who are out and about, and good for them. There are a lot more in this area even. I'm thinking Lindsay and Fenlon and Bob Cajun predominantly were some smaller publishers, and 2 of them women, which is great because this is not a female dominated industry.
Yeah.
I don't think the larger players look to us at all. I think that they definitely are trying to do their development pieces, and the ones that have the massive resources are doing okay in terms of that. But I generally don't agree with their approaches. And the advantage that we have is that we're a small company, so we can pivot really quickly. There's that word again, but we've actually used it for quite a while. But we can change quickly. We
Well,
can
you
change.
can also, if you don't like pivot, like you guys can be very nimble, or you
Yeah.
can be very opportunistic in the best possible
Yeah.
use of the word opportunistic. You can jump on opportunities because you're not trying to shift the Titanic away from the
And
iceberg.
it's not tied to corporate policy, where those are big ships that may not change quickly, and then they have a number of different media properties. So how do they do redesigns and those kind of things? That's a huge, massive rollout. So they can't move quickly. So
Yeah.
our agility is good.
Yeah, that's okay. So I want to talk about social media, but first I want to say that I saw something where you were mad as heck that you were scooped not scooped, sorry. You had a scoop and another publication took your scoop without attributing it to you.
We have attribution issues, of course, right? So generally, I mean, technically, most media companies will have journalistic standards that they publish, and that they should be following. And it's dog eat dog right now. So it can be an issue. We often produce stories that are picked up by major media, and by that I mean like the national broadcaster. So that's a good thing. It's actually almost becoming a selling point, because I can say to people, let me know when CBC calls you about this story, and I think that they might do that. So yeah.
And I am just so curious about the ecosystem in a small town. So you're born and raised in Peterborough, right? And I know the bit I know about you, which I guess is a lot after all these years, is you are so community minded and you have such a belief in community. Where does that community mindedness come from?
I think if I have to choose one force, it would be my father, because he was involved in the community. He was a GE welder, but involved in the community. And I guess he just had that driving force to be involved. He was a union organizer too, right? So yeah.
We literally have had parallel lives. So my dad
Really?
was an
Yeah.
engineer at GE. Yeah, he was a
Wow.
nuclear engineer, building 21. So you went to all those, like the GE picnic up at Nichols Oval, and you went to the Christmas party at the MEMS Center.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
Girl, you get those tickets, girls. Those are some of my best memories ever. But you get your ticket for your present, girls ages 10 to 12, and you'd go and stand at
Yes.
the table.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I love, and the Nichols Oval picnics. Oh my gosh, that was the GE picnic was the biggest thing.
And they had the great rides up at Nickel. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
And the races, we'd always get those balls, those blue, white, and red balls, the spongy balls as
Right.
prizes. Yeah, we totally. But my grandparents were down on Chamberlain Street, uh,
Right.
and so I was sort of north end, south end, back and forth.
Right. I was
Um,
all South End.
And so tell me about, I mean, you were doing you talked about it was such a great way that you described it, the early gig economy work you were doing at Art Space and the Canadian Images Film Festival. But where do you decide or realize it's a priority for you to sit on boards and affect community change that way?
I'm not sure that there was a pivotal moment in that. It's just, it's in your nature to do that or it isn't, right? It was how I was raised. My dad literally was a rabble rouser. And he was an organizer. So early indoctrination into community work and that and making change in the community. So
Have you ever wanted to live anywhere else?
no, I haven't really thought about it. So no.
No. And you have that great cottage up. Where is the cottage?
So our cottage is in Halliburton Township. We're just north of Apsley, halfway between Apsley and Bancroft on Eels Lake. We're right across from Silent Lake Provincial Park. Yeah.
And you're
So my dad built the cottage. He had the vision to do that. Really bought the property early on. So and built it himself with GE lumber.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to write something about because you have great stories. We have a cottage on Lake Simcoe, but the great stories about nightmare neighbors.
Yes, we do.
I want to ask you about social media. I want to ask you about the advent of social media. So, you were talking, were you on MySpace already before everything shifted?
I
So,
did a stint on MySpace just because I was trying it out. Like I think people go through those phases where they're trying things out. And also there were a lot of musicians there. That was the platform for musicians, right? And music was important for us to promote. I didn't really get into it heavily. It wasn't really my thing, but we kind of had to be there. Like all social channels, we have to be there, right? But yeah, so no, it wasn't. I think I joined Facebook in May 2007.
oh, I was November 2006 when you still had to be invited because my friend Edward
Yes.
invited me to
Yes.
join. Yeah. And what do you think? What are your thoughts on social media, good, bad, and ugly of it for you
Uh,
personally and for the business?
well, it's pretty critical for businesses now. So the trick is, and I know that there's a lot of resistance around, should I do it? How to do it? Doing it well. I don't think enough businesses and organizations take it seriously enough to, you have to realize that if you've got a message coming in, that's the new equivalent of your phone ringing. And I think that transition is still evolving in terms of using it properly as a communication tool. And what we see is that people may not update their website anymore. They might update their Facebook. They've abandoned their Twitter account. So the consistency is an issue, right? The consistency of embracing all of those pieces. And, they need to figure it out for sure. Um, I am seeing more. It's been interesting to watch this happen over the past couple of weeks where restaurants are actually taking reservations on their Facebook accounts and responding to people. So I think that the need to move digitally in the past few months is increasing, and they're realizing that they need to do that. But generally, my advice when I was doing internet marketing seminars was don't build on leased land. So if you're building a presence on Facebook and you don't have a website, that's a problem because your website and your email list and those pieces that you can own are the pieces that you can own. You own them. And whatever happens in the future, you can convert those. But if the bottom falls out of Facebook tomorrow for whatever reason, and they've had some dips, in terms of what's going on there, or if Instagram goes away for whatever reason, or if another channel comes along, like what happened with MySpace, it can shift. I mean, that seems less likely now, but it can shift, and you don't own those spaces. So you have to be prepared to be agile on that. So I do this little chart where it's like the ecosystem, and your website's always in the middle, and your email list is what you own, and then the channels are all around, and you have to use those to drive. So we use ours to drive traffic to our website.
Okay, so tell me, you are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Yeah, I think that's it. Well, and we also have a weekly e-news, so we put a lot of growth effort into our weekly e-news as well.
Yeah, I don't know why I was never signed up for it. And then I got something from you recently and I signed up for it because you call it VIP news, which makes me feel very special.
We do. And then we've put it out, and we're actually in our 5th year of that, which is amazing. We started it December 2015, I think, and it's really grown quite a bit, and it's growing all the time every week. So it's a weekly e-news, and comes out Wednesday morning pretty consistently at the same time. And it's our top news for the week for people who haven't had a chance to look at the recap and community news. And we used to give away concert tickets. Every week we'd have like a giveaway, right? So that's kind of on hold right now because, and when Fourth Line was coming up, we would be giving those away too. So it was great that people could have a reason to scroll to the bottom of the e-news and enter something. And we never had any lack of anything to give away in the arts community, which was great. But it's kind of interesting to see that our readership is actually up in that. So
I was going to ask you, how many individual people or IPs or whatever come to Korsunov every year?
So I don't know, but I'm just kind of going on readership right now. So, and I've lost track, honestly, of our page views because we were sitting at about 1 million a month page views late in the year. Right now, I'm just keeping an eye on readership because that's pretty pivotal right now in terms of the pandemic. So in March, we started hitting 90,000 headcount readers daily. I know, apply that to a print public. That doesn't exist in print anymore. It just doesn't. And that's one of the downsides. We were talking a little bit earlier about, are we taken seriously? Well, no, because 90,000 headcount unique readers every day, you don't hear of that in print. So we need to be taken seriously because we have that readership. And it's not even really a single reader. It's a computer count, right? It's an IP count. So those were like our peak days. So we're kind of sitting right now between, on a slower news day, 60,000 is our base readership per day, and then up to 90 on higher days. Wow. And it was previously 30, so it's double to triple.
And you're doing all of this in your home office somewhere in Peterborough.
But we have a great team. We have a great team from everywhere, right? From like Port Hope to Coe Hill, our writers exist and work at home.
How many writers? How many people work for?
We currently have 10 or 12 freelance writers. We have 2 women on maternity leave, so who've just had children. So yeah, we're kind of in flux on that. But yeah, usually about 10 to 12.
Wow. And how many stories would they be delivering a day, a week? Like, how do you measure that?
Oh, Bruce actually does regular counts on that. We're pushing out, in terms of local news, probably more than maybe the print media, because they have the advantage that they can share they're sharing locally the news, and then they're also sharing national, right? So they have some syndicated news happening there too, but 10 to 12 stories per day typically.
Wow.
And also we're just bringing our culture writers back in, so we're in transition on that as well, back to what we should be doing.
Right. And so, I think in the olden days, we thought the internet was going to relieve us. We thought, relieve us of the work, make it all a bit easier. But I'm thinking now about 10 to 12 articles a day, and then the 3 social media platforms that you have to be updating. How much work is it? Is it 7 days a week? How many hours a day? Like traditional. I know COVID is particular because it's the century to be had pandemic, but what's normally?
A typical week is, over 50 hours for sure, but it's broken up as well, right? So, yeah, I would say it's in the 50 to 60 hour. A heavy week would be 60 hours. Depends on the time of year as well. Sometimes we get a little bit crazier. Like typically when the season starts to come back into swing, August, September, events ramp up, that kind of thing. So it's a little bit seasonal
Right.
that way, but I don't even know what normal is anymore, so I can't intelligently answer that question. What is normal? It's new
Moving like
normal.
117 days ago and the whole world went crazy. It's not even that many days,
Yeah.
but it's had such a profound shift of the world.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Advice for people, or what do you think is coming? Is there, because I do really believe you're an ahead of the curve kind of person. And before we go, we're gonna I'm sure there are questions that Lindy has. We're gonna go into that in a second because I have to let you go. I know that, but I'm curious about what we should be looking at.
So I've talked to a couple of small businesses recently about, how they can plan and in terms of that type of work. I think that where we start with that is a SWOT. So we do our strengths, weaknesses all the time. We keep it current. And that helps us stay ahead of the curve as well. And quite honestly, I don't know what's coming. I mean, I'm trying to figure it out. My email box is filled with emails that I have to backtrack through. And there's so much information right now around where are we going, what are we doing, what's happening, and then we have to stay on top of the medical and health side of it too. I do think that from what I'm hearing this week, and I made the mistake of watching a documentary on vaccines this week as well. So my head is in that space, but it's not going away quickly. I hate the phrase new normal. I really do, but it's definitely here for some time, for sure. And I think it's changing things. We had an opportunity actually, like in the 2005, 2007, to invest in these vaccines. And again, my head's in that space because I watched that documentary, and we didn't do it. But I think that we've had a wake up call, and that's definitely changing. So
Yeah, I was this morning. I got up early to get organized for this, and I was thinking, yeah, well over 100 days. I think it was like 112 days maybe since I got my lashes done last, or something ridiculous like that. I got them done yesterday, and I was like, well, that like if it's 1,000 days, which is pushing 3 years, we're 10% of the way through, so that's not bad. Like
that's true. That
and
is a very
100 more days
positive.
will
Yeah.
be 20% of the way through. Like I have to, so that I don't cry and lay on the couch all the time, I have to think that way.
Well, we do, and we do have to have hope, right? For sure. And there are some things. So it's a question of finding the silver linings. And we've got tons just even though we lost 75% revenue in the first 4 weeks, we have tons of silver linings. We have new readership, we have all of that growth. So we just need to figure it out. And for us, the starting point is to do our strengths, weaknesses analysis on that and figure out the way forward.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think just being all of us being open and not making too many plans because we don't know.
Yeah.
For us in the culture sector, is there something you haven't done in your world to this point that you're kind of itching to do? Something, a plan in place that maybe is going to happen? What did
Yes.
you call it? This was your year of disruption, and then you got the ultimate disruption of not of your making.
That's right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize for choosing that word disrupt because it may have impacted everyone. We did have a plan in place that we started working on last September, got disrupted on it. So we're going to roll it out. I'm not going to talk about it because, I'm just not going to. I'm being really paranoid.
Can you give me a log line or a tagline of it or not? Then I'll leave you alone.
No.
Okay, you son.
But I'm sorry. I can't.
That's okay. I know you're in that business. You're in that scoop business. I imagine you with a fedora with the press in here.
I hate that term press.
Do you?
I do, because it's based in print.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with us. It's media.
Media.
It's media. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't say press releases. I mean, I worked in communications for years, but I say media releases. I don't know why. I don't like press releases. Okay, so I'm going to find out, Lindy, are there some questions for Jeannine Taylor?
There are.
Okay.
So the first question starts with a comment. So it's for Jeannine. You do such an amazing job of keeping us all informed, and I'm always impressed with the balance you show when it comes to contentious issues. So the
Mm.
question is, how do you manage to separate your personal views from your professional work?
I'm not sure that I always do a good job of that. I mean, I tend to kind of maybe lose it a couple of days before an election or something and go public, but so I'm not sure. I'm not infallible on that. But the answer in that is that if I have my proper journalism hat on and I'm doing that properly, and sometimes Bruce reminds me that my brand personally is also reflecting the business. It's just a matter of keeping that focus. So it's about personal brand. But yes, I do have to be careful. I think more so than we all realize that, we've come through some sticky times on social media right now. And I think that we all need to be paying attention to that.
Interesting.
And then another question submitted is our online space is so ... accessible for personal commentary. Inevitably, trolls will latch onto an idea or specific coverage. How do you handle criticisms that can be posted so publicly?
I guess we're fortunate that we don't get criticized directly a lot. It kind of stings when we do because we think we're doing a pretty good job generally, but it can be an issue. We certainly try not to delete any comments on social media unless they're in the zone of bullying or hate or swear words and those kind of things. What we do find is that the community will moderate themselves. We had to post a really contentious story last week about a Confederate flag locally, and it really brought out people who were not our regular readers. So it attracted a lot of people, and that's not fair to our regular readers. And I really hate that part of it. But we had to keep an eye on that thread. But it generally ended up that the community does moderate each other, but it does take a lot of time to keep an eye on that as well. And generally right now, people are very, very prickly, very prickly. I see people debating things that are, would they really jump into that under normal circumstances? I don't think so. People are fearful and all of that. So I think we all need to be really careful. We call it getting off the highway. That was from my meditation app where it's like, just sit back and watch the traffic go by and stay off of the highway. So yeah, Bruce will often say to me, okay, it's time to take the off ramp, take the next, to just moderate what we're doing.
Yeah, great. Next.
And I do have just one last question for Jeannine, which is, what role do community partners play in Korsunov.com?
Well, they're pretty huge because we have a lot of alliances with organizations like Fourth Line. We have to keep developing those. You're transitioning, we're transitioning. It's huge. It's what we do, and we have to maintain those relationships all the time. And that's probably where my role is more than anyone else's. Well, actually, no, that's not true because we have writers who are, like our food writer develops those. I think people probably know Sam Tweedle. He's constantly in the community looking at the cultural stories. And we have a Sam column coming back this week. Yay! Culture content. Yeah. So really important for all of our writers to be doing that. It's critical. It's what we do.
That's great. Anything else from you, Lindy?
No more questions.
That's awesome. Okay.
Thanks to everyone for tuning in at 8 a.m. I can't believe how many people tune in at 8 a.m. on Friday morning.
That's awesome. It's our breakfast chat, and it was so great to sit with you and learn more about what you do. It's you're fascinating. Your business is fascinating, and I think everybody in the region owes you a huge debt of gratitude for staying in the weeds and doing it.
Yeah, we're gonna come out of the weeds.
Yeah, that's great. Nice to see you. Next time I see you, hopefully it will be in person at the farm.
Yes, I know. We really missed Media Day this year. Yeah, so we'll make up for that.
I know, sad. Okay, well, be well. Thank you. And thanks to everyone for watching, and we'll see you all soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. Bye.